and get started this morning. You should have received some information which was requested by the Joint Committee on State Building Construction. Actually, it kind of is a continuation of the discussion that we're having in regards to the state buildings across the state. And that was emailed to all the committee members regarding the capital improvement reports for fiscal year 2021 and fiscal year 2022. Committee, are there any bill introductions this morning? Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have RS 1152 related to teachers' unions and their ability to negotiate on behalf of teachers.
All right, committee, you've heard the bill introduction. Is there a second? Second by Representative Hoffman. All those in favor say aye. Opposed? Bill is introduced. Any further bill introductions? All right, seeing none, we'll go ahead and we'll resume discussion in regards to the state institutions for mental health. And so I will now turn it over to Chairman Carpenter.
Hang on. Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. Do you want me to start over, or do we want to continue?
Could recap a little bit on the discussion that we had yesterday and then continue on to the new information.
All right.
You also indicate the volume and page so we can refer to that to the budget books.
I'm starting off on the intellectual hospitals again, page volume 1, 273. So I guess I'll start with, I'll skip the agency recs and start with the governor's recommendation for 2021. The governor recommends expenditures of $58.5 million, including $25.4 million from the SGF for expenditures for the ID institutions in 2021. All funds increase of $376,581, or 0.6% of the agency's revised request. This includes an SGF decrease of $822,000, or 3.1%, and another all funds increase of $1.2 million, or 3.8% from the agency's 2020 revised estimate. The increase is due to federal funds awarded to the state hospitals by the Strengthening People by the Sparks Task Force. These were provided to each of the state hospitals for hazard pay bonuses and to compensate frontline workers for the continued potential exposure from COVID-19. The increases are partially offset by the governor not recommending Parsons State Hospital and Training Center supplemental requests to increase direct support salaries. The Budget Committee concurs with the governor's recommendation. I might add the Sparks Committee in 2021 was $1.1 million that they received from Sparks. I'll stand for questions on 21.
Committee, are there any questions for Chairman Carpenter in regards to fiscal year 2021? All right, seeing none, you may move on to fiscal year 2022.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Page 273, volume 1. Agencies request $61.7 million, including $30.2 million from the state general fund for expenditures for the institution on intellectual disabilities for FY22. These expenditures from the Kansas Neurological Institute and Parsons State Hospital and Training Center. It's an all funds increase of $3.6 million, or 6.2% above the FYI 2021 revised estimate. The increase includes an SGF increase of $3.9 million above the 21 revised estimate, and a special revenue decrease of $319,000. The increase is primarily attributed to both hospitals receiving requested enhancements to increase salary for direct pay positions or direct care positions. The hospitals indicate a historically high turnover rate related to the positions' duties combined with low starting salaries, which enables competition from private sector and other state agencies. The increase also includes expenditures for repairing infrastructure at the Parsons State Hospital and Training Center, as well as fluctuations in utilities for both hospitals. The request includes 914.7 FTE positions, which is the same as 2021. The governor recommends $5.5 $57.4 million, including $23.3 million SGF for expenditures in the ID institutions for 2022. This is an all funds decrease of $4.3 million, or 6.9% below the agency's 2020 or 22 request. This includes an SGF decrease of $6.9 million, or 22.8%, and an all funds increase of $2.6 million, or 8.2%, from the agency's 22 request. The decrease is primarily due to the governor not recommending the agency's enhancement request for direct care staff salary increases, contributing decrease to the governor's adoption of the agency's reduced resources request. The agencies do anticipate receiving federal Title XIX money to offset the loss in SGF. The Budget Committee concurs with the governor's recommendation with the following adjustments. Add $2.2 million SGF to increase the base starting salaries from including fringe benefits for direct care support positions in 2022 at KNI, and at Parsons add $2.1 million SGF to increase the base starting salaries including fringe benefits for direct care support positions in 2022. I might add that KNI received $14 million in Title XIX money, Medicare, and Parsons $16.5 million. The reduced resources were $2.78 million, and that was made up mainly of she did not include the $2.3 million worth of pay increases. So I'll stand for questions.
You said she didn't include the 2.3. Wouldn't it be 4.3? Because we have 2.2 million.
Yeah, that's right. 4.3.
To KNI, and then 2.1 to Parsons. So
yes.
The total is 4.3.
Right. Our recommendations just included what she deleted from the request.
Now, are those pay increases, I guess, what's the rationale? Is that to just basically increase the starting wage? And is that aside from the 2.5% increase for state employees?
Correct.
All right. Committee, any questions for Chairman Carpenter? Representative Landwehr.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I do apologize. I couldn't hear everything that Representative Carpenter was saying, so I may be kind of out of order on the subject matter. But, you know, we had a lot of discussion yesterday on our mental health facilities, et cetera. So I would propose, and I think there's a few members in that committee that would be interested in perhaps being put together where we could sit down and study what the Mental Health Modernization Committee came back with on facilities, because there was a lot of talk about it in that report. There's also been talk about looking at least one, if not two, new regional hospital psych beds for adults. We feel like we pretty much have the juveniles covered, except maybe up in the northwest corner of the state, and that is definitely being worked on by the secretary. So, and I also understand that possibly the building that you were talking about yesterday that's empty, someone had told me last night, and I have not verified this, that may be being used right now for juvenile beds. So we need to probably check into that. But I think maybe we ought to look at putting together a little subcommittee within your appropriations members to sit down and maybe go in a little more detail with this. Then that would give direction not only for the legislature, I think, going forward, but it could also give direction to the interim Mental Health Modernization Committee that will continue work this year.
And we can definitely entertain that request. I think we do need to have some type of analysis done on regards to all the buildings and the service areas in regards to mental health, because obviously this is an issue that has been impacting the state for many years now. I have not been aware, and I don't know who had instructed you, that the facility I was referring to yesterday on the Larned campus was being used for juvenile beds. But I would like more information on that, if you could provide that for the committee.
Yes, I'm planning on doing a little bit of research on that today because I had not heard that either, Mr. Chairman.
Do you have any further questions for Chairman Carpenter, Representative Landwehr?
I don't believe so at this time. Representative Carpenter has done a great job of working with me as he goes through this process so that we're both on the same page on these topics. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Representative Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll learn how to turn on the button here. Looking at what we have restored, if we would, are those the two things that the governor cut? Was there any other request that was in the budget that had been cut?
Well, there were allotments, but they were made in 2020. So I think that was the only reduced resources that she did cut. Is that correct, Matt? Okay.
So essentially adding back that 4.3 would put us at the agency request, assuming the Title 19 funds are rock solid also.
Correct.
Okay.
And those Title 19 funds do include the 6.2 enhanced FMAP that we've been receiving at least up until the time frame that they do end right now.
How does their pay compare under the governor's proposal and under the committee's proposal to where we think parity should be? Are we even there when we restore that?
You know, we had this conversation yesterday, and I'm not sure money is the only answer. I think it's the only thing at this point in time that we have control over, that we can try to increase their salaries. I might add, their starting salaries are, and I think the chairman has a deal, their starting salaries are $12.35 an hour. And I think it's very hard to compete when you start at $12.35 an hour for one of your most used positions. So this is an effort to try to get that salary up to where they can be competitive with the private sector and whoever else they need to be competitive with.
Thank you. And then would the increase largely go to folks at that pay level?
No, it wouldn't, but it would help. And it's kind of what happened a few years ago with KDOC when we gave the starting folks, and then you make the guys mad that have been there and been doing the double shifts and the triple shifts, you know what I mean? And so, no, it would not. And I'm not for that either, because those are the people that are doing the double shifts when people don't show up. Those are your most experienced people, the most dedicated people. And so they should share in that because they're the ones actually that are filling in when they are short.
Well, and I would also just kind of elaborate on that. I know in private business, there are cases where you increase the starting wage and you have existing employees who are not making as much as those individuals that you're trying to recruit in there, and that's kind of the way this situation would be as well.
It would be if we just dedicated it to the starting salary, and we saw that in KDOC out at El Dorado. I'm here to tell you when they did that with the starting salary, and all those folks had been there for 10, 15, 20 years and working those triple shift, double shifts and all that kind of stuff, found themselves making nearly the same as someone that got hired in off the street. It didn't work out that well.
Representative Ballard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would agree with what the chairman just said a few minutes ago, but the other thing is it would also help with that answer we had of turnover, so that they know that they're being appreciated, they're getting a little more money, and that's keeping them there longer, even though it's still a high turnover. So it's important in that area as well.
I'd like to move on to a different subject, and I believe this would fall in regards to the state institutions for mental health. Last year in conference, when we were debating the budget bill with the Senate, there was $4 million added to KVC for them to identify a new location or look at the existing location that they did have shut down in Hayes. And so I'm wondering, what is the status of that $4 million that was appropriated last year in regards to KVC?
Mr. Chair, that will be in KDAD's budget. We'll be hearing this next week, and we're now gathering information on that. I will have a detailed report on that when we report out to KDAD's budget.
Sorry to jump ahead. I was just.
That's okay.
I know
I
that,
understand.
that facility
And
was
I'm
actually
cur-
on the tour that we had, well, almost 2 years ago, a year and a half ago, in regards to the institutions of mental health. We actually toured KVC. And so having that money appropriated last year, I just wanted to have an update, but I guess we'll have that at a later date when we have the KDAD's budget.
We will. And it's kind of complicated, these hospital budgets, and KDAD oversees them, but, you know, there's a lot of things that intertwine. For instance, the state building fund is for these hospitals is in KDAD's budget. And so you have to look here, and then when you look at what they're going to spend on out of the building fund, it's in KDAD's budget. So it's a little complicated that way, but we will have a full report on that when we do KDAD's budget.
All right, thank you. Any further questions for Chairman Carpenter? Representative Tarwater.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I may have missed something in your presentation, but a few years back, we lost certification on several beds. Can you update us on that? At one point, we were told we were going to have them all recertified, and then we only got like 60% of it certified, and we were supplementing that. Are we still supplementing that, or are we 100% certified?
No, and I'm glad you asked that question. Let me dig through my papers here because I do have that information for you, and I'm glad you asked that because it's for someone that was here in 15 when we closed that down and made a $10 million budget increase that year to fund OSH for the loss of Medicaid beds. It's always on my mind, believe me. Let me find what I have for that. What I can, where is that, Matt? You know what I'm talking about? I had that. Yeah, there it is. Thank you. I have it somewhere, but here, Matt has it. Since 2015, we've spent $11.8 million on OSH in building projects to get it up to speed, get it recertified where all those beds are certified. We authorized money last year in the budget, and the contracts, the way I understand it, because of COVID and some delays and stuff like that, the contracts and the architectural drawings and that kind of stuff are being drawn as we speak. And we had report in committee that they look to be done and building or possibly even done with the project by the end of next year. I don't recommend that you hold your breath on that, but that's what we've been told.
So how many of the beds are certified at this point versus not?
Oh, man.
I was just going to ask that question myself.
Yeah. 60.
I thought it was 60. So, and how many are not certified?
What is it, 24? So they're planning on bringing it up to 72. So it would be 12 beds.
Okay. Representative Tarwater?
I think we've been sitting at 60 for a few years now. What are they doing? We were told that we were going to get 100% certification when we gave them that initial supplement.
I don't disagree with you.
Thank you.
Any further questions for Chairman Carpenter? Representative Carlin?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm sorry, I had to step out for a moment. And when I came back, you were talking about the juvenile beds at Larned. Would you please restate, Mr. Chair, what you said about those beds being used now? I thought it was vacant. You thought it was vacant. Would you go over that?
That was a question, or actually a comment that was made by Representative Landwehr, where she said she was having a conversation with somebody, I believe she said last evening, where that facility that we referenced to yesterday, during the conversation we're having in regards to the campus at Larned, that facility was open now with juvenile beds. I have not heard that, and I was just speaking with my chief of staff, and we're going to be setting up, in coordination with the Speaker's office, a committee from the Appropriations Committee to look at all the facilities and actually dive into whether or not that facility is open or if it remains closed, which has been my knowledge that that building has been closed for almost 10 years now.
Yeah, no, I told somebody that yesterday myself. I may have been the source for that conversation, but no, is that for children that are, who goes into that facility?
That I do not know.
Okay, all right, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll be interested in the information.
Representative Hoffman?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sorry, I had a meeting yesterday, evidently, when you were talking about this, so I wasn't sure when you mentioned it. I do serve on the Joint Oversight, Juvenile Justice Joint Oversight Committee, and I believe that the Department of Corrections did open that over the summer as an overflow for COVID, something with COVID. It's not juveniles in it. I think it's actually adults that they're using it somehow. But I think it's a temporary fix.
Well, and this is even more reason to have that committee look at exactly what the facilities statewide. If you recall my comments I made yesterday, I said, as a state, we're not very good stewards of the buildings that we have in our mental health system and obviously across the state in other departments and agencies. And so we even have conflicting information about what that facility is being used for. In Representative Landwehr's comments, it was for juveniles, and then now Representative Hoffman is saying it was a COVID carryover. So we need to understand exactly if that facility is being used and what it's being utilized for. So I think even more reason to have this committee look at having a subcommittee to look into that facility and also the facilities across the state. Any further questions for Chairman Carpenter? I'm not seeing any. Chairman Carpenter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just another deal here about Adair Osawatomie is they did have a wait list. The annual wait list would be 13. The average would be 13 people per day. I do have a list here that breaks it out from January 1 to December 31st, 2020. I'd say that it probably is an average of 13, but it varies. There are days when it's 7 or 5 or whatever, but it's an average of 13 per month.
Representative Ballard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll just add one other thing. If you remember, we had a proviso the year before where we asked Secretary Howard, when could we open Osawatomie for voluntary? Because since 2015, it's been closed. And she indicated to us that it would be July of 2021. We found out that because of COVID and other measures, it will be more like 6 months later, but they are still on track to open Osawatomie, which really is more important than we ever thought, because sheriffs, police officers and all have indicated that they have no place on the Western Front to be able to take these individuals if they have to. So that's really good news for us, and I'm pleased that they're still on track, even though it may be a little bit later. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any further questions? Representative Sutton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You mentioned 13 people waiting in their waiting list. What kind of a bed turnover do we have? How long are they waiting on that list? Do you have any idea on that?
I do not.
I mean, are they waiting for a day or waiting for 6 months?
We had that report. I can't remember what the average length of time was. Hang on, we'll get it for you just here in a minute.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any further questions for Chairman Carpenter? Representative Wolfmore.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And maybe you can speak to this, or maybe the problem used to be, it kind of following up on Representative Sutton's question, that not only did we have a waiting list, it seemed like that they were almost cycling people. I mean, you weren't there quite long enough to get adequate treatment, and then it almost, like as a revolving door. And I'm hopeful that's gotten better, but I really don't know. Do you have any information on that?
I do not. There has been some discussion about, some of it has to do with the MCOs and how long they allow a person to receive a variety of mental health services. So it's not as easy as you might
I understand.
think.
Thank you very much.
All right, any further questions for Chairman Carpenter? Representative Hoffman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm a little concerned that we're kind of piecemealing these increases. We've already done it one other time in another budget. I think I'll make a motion that we remove 1 and 1, I guess, for both of the hospitals. We remove those increases and set them aside for later discussion at omnibus.
Committee, you've heard the motion, second by Representative Helgerson. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, Representative Hoffman, you may close.
I close.
All right, committee, you've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed?
No.
The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. Motion passes. Back on the budget. All right, seeing no more further discussion, Chairman Carpenter.
I would make a motion to approve the budgets for the state institutional for intellectual disabilities for 21 and 22 as amended.
All right, committee, you've heard the motion. Is there a second? Second by Representative Ballard. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? No. The ayes appear to have it. And I believe Representative Helgerson would like to have his vote recorded. Any further members to have their vote recorded? All right, seeing none, motion passes. Representative Ballard.
I could have argued against that amendment, but I think that was the chair's responsibility. And I was trying to support him. But by drawing that money, does that send a message? That's all I want to know. Does it send a message to the people working there that we don't have faith in them? That's what I was really concerned about. Could Representative Hoffman answer that one? I just want to know, because when you withdraw it, unless we're going to do it through all of them, does it say to those people who we're trying to keep and prevent that layover, would that send the wrong message?
Well, and I'll have Representative Hoffman respond to your comments. Just for the committee's assurance is we've had obviously this issue in regards to mental health facilities across the state. And we kind of talked about it yesterday with the disparity at Larned State Hospital and then with the correctional facility on that campus as well. And then when we get to conference, that has always been a Senate position that we look at it holistically and look at all the institutions. And I think, and I don't know if Representative Hoffman, this was the direction he was going with the motion, but we're just putting it aside. And if we do have the creation of this subcommittee that's going to be looking at the buildings themselves, we can also have an analysis done in regards to the pay of all the institutions and trying to bring that up and then have a discussion in regards to that. But Representative Hoffman?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And that's what I meant about piecemeal. I don't want us to piecemeal this as each time we go through. Let's have a look at it later throughout the whole institutions. And so I fully intend for us to look at it later. That's the reason I put it. This reason I didn't cut it. I put it just to omnibus. So.
Well,
And Ballard.
I really appreciate that. And one of the reasons why I decided I was going to just comment on that is because, you know, we have asked Osawatomie and Parsons specific things to do, and they've lived up to it. And what the chairman said to them, that even though we may not agree with some things in the budget, we're very pleased with the progress that they're making and the cut down on overtime and all of those things. So I just want to know that it's not them, you know, and we're trying to make sure that we don't do anything to send a wrong message that we say we appreciate, and then we do something that says that perhaps we don't. Does that make sense? All right, thank you for the explanation.
We'll continue discussion on that.
Yeah, and I might add, you know, just because it's disapproved in this committee, it doesn't mean they still don't have problems and won't have problems, so.
Duly noted. Any further comments? Okay, Chairman Carpenter, yesterday we were having, I think we stopped in the middle of the discussion in regards to the mental hospitals. And so if we could resume that discussion.
Sure. Do you want me to start at the beginning?
Yeah, go ahead and start at
Okay,
the beginning.
very
just so
good.
we're all up to the same.
Okay, page 302, volume 1, State Institutions for Mental Health. I won't read the start of it. Okay, the agency's request revised operating budget of $122.2 million, including $103.7 million state general funds and expenditures for the mental institutions. These expenditures for Larned State Hospital and Osawatomie State Hospital are all funds increases of $1.9 million or 1.6% above the 2021 approved amount. This is an SGF increase of $741 or 0.7%, and an all funds increase of $1.2 million and 6.8% above the 2021 approved amount. The revised request includes 1,423 FTE positions, which is a decrease of 11 FTE positions below the approved amount. The increase is primarily related to increasing expenditures for staffing at the mental institutions. Both OSH and Larned have historical challenges with retention of staff, which the agency indicates is related to competition with the private sector in order to ensure adequate staffing at both hospitals. The agency utilized both FTE positions as well as contractual staffing services. Due to the COVID-19 panic, the agencies have experienced issues covering shifts due to employees being quarantined, and as a result, the mental health institutions have experienced increased reliance on contract staffing to ensure adequate staffing. This increase is also related to the replacement of several agency vehicles at OSH as well as Larned State Hospital. Supplemental requests for safety and security upgrades that include a video surveillance and ligature-resistant furniture. This increase is partially offset by decreased expenditures for pharmaceuticals and food due to the agency adjusting based on actual utilization for 2020. The mental health institution requests a revised capital improvement of $2.5 million, including $86,000 SGF from 2021. This is an all funds increase of $1.4 million and an SGF increase of $86,697 above the approved budget. This increase is due to OSH receiving a revised estimate for repair work for its patient therapy pool. The governor recommends $122.9 million, including $102 million SGF for operating expenditures for the mental health institutions for 2021. This is an all funds increase of $708 above the agency's 2021 request. This includes an SGF decrease of $1.7 million and an other all funds increase of $2.4 million from the agency's 2021 request. The recommendation includes 1,423 FTE positions, which is the same number in the revised estimate. The increase is primarily related to the receipt of CRS funds awarded to the state hospitals by the Sparks Task Force. The increase is partially offset by decreases related to the governor not recommending LSH's supplemental requests. Additionally, the recommendation includes a lapse of several reapportionments from 2020 for the mental health institutions. However, the governor recommends utilization of agency fees funds rather than SGF monies for these expenditures. The recommendation includes $1.3 million, all from special revenue funds for capital improvement expenditures for 2021. This is an all funds decrease of $1.2 million below the agency's 2021 revised estimate. The governor recommends that OSH work with KDADS to include its therapy pool project in the 5-year capital improvement plan. The recommendation also decreases the capital improvement funding back to the approved amount in 2021. The committee concurs with the governor's recommendation for 2021. I'll stand for questions.
Committee, any questions for Chairman Carpenter in regards to fiscal year 2021? Not seeing any. You may move on to 2022.
Well, I was just going to volunteer that CRF funds for OSH was a little over $1 million, and LHS was about $2 million, 24,000. So for both agencies.
All right, thank you. Still seeing no comments, you may move on to fiscal year 2022.
The agency requests an operating budget of $123 million or $105.5 million from the State General Fund for expenditures for the mental health institutions for 2022. These are expenditures for Larned State Hospital and Osawatomie State Hospital. This is an all funds increase of $825,000. This includes an SGF increase of $1.7 million and an all funds decrease of $923,000 from the 2021 revised estimate. The request includes 1,423 FTE positions, same number as in 2021. The SGF increase is primarily due to Larned State Hospital enhancement requests of 2022. The expansion of the SPTP program comprises a majority of the agency's enhancement requests. Larned indicates a significant growth in sexual predator treatment program over the last several years, and as a result, the agency proposed to create a new SPTP unit at Larned and expand the community-based SPTP supervision services. Partially offsetting the increase is a transfer from LHS to the Kansas Department of Corrections relating to ending the memorandum of understanding between the agencies regarding the care of inmates with mental health needs at the Department of Corrections. OSH generally anticipates maintaining 2021 spending levels with the increases related to yearly fluctuations across all expenditure categories. The agency requests a capital improvements of $150,000 off from special revenue funds for 2022. This is an all funds decrease of $2.3 million or 93.9% and SGF decrease of $86,000 below the 2021 revised estimate. The decrease is due to the agency anticipating therapy pool project being concluded in 2021. The governor's recommendations include $113.9 million, including $92 million from the SGF for operating expenditures for the mental health institutions for 2022. This all funds decrease of $9.1 million or 7.4% above the agency's 2022 request. This includes an SGF decrease of $13.5 million or 12.8% and an all other funds increase of $4.4 million or 25.1% above the agency's 2022 request. The recommendation includes 1,429 employees, FTE employees, which is an increase of 6 FTEs above the agency's 2022 request. The position increase is mainly attributable to staff for the video surveillance monitoring at LHS. The SGF decrease is primarily related to the governor's adoption of the agency's reduced resource budget. However, and that'll be found on page 321. However, the governor recommends that the agency utilize agency fee funds to offset several of the agency's proposed SGF reductions, which account for all the other fund increases. The decrease is also due to the governor not recommending a majority of LSH's enhancement requests. The decrease is partially offset by the governor recommending certain enhancement requests from LHS for a new Omnicell medication dispensing machines and the purchase of a new video monitoring system. The recommendation also includes $25,000 all from special revenue funds for capital improvement expenditures in 2022. It's an all funds decrease of $125,000 below the agency's 2022 request. The governor reduced funding and recommends that OSH work with ks to include the rehabilitation and repair projects in its 5-year capital plan. The Budget Committee concurred with the governor's recommendations.
Could you elaborate on the governor's budget adjustment in regards to Larned State Hospital?
I can. If you look at that, that was a $9.2 million reduction, just, cutting through the deal there. And then the GBA was 2.4. And so then you take the food service, which needed to be taken, it's 3.1 million for the food service. That will now be handled by DOC. And I've still been trying to figure out exactly if that was a clean wash or not. But at this point in time, it's a $3.1 million reduction in Larned State Hospital's budget. I maintain that there's got to be some costs in there, and I've worked with Representative Francis on this, and we still haven't gotten what I would call a satisfactory answer to that. So that leaves a balance of 3.6 million, which will be paid for with fee funds, and they are extremely low. Larned, they took about $3 million out of their fee fund to balance that, make up that 3 million, and Osh still has about 3.1 million in their fee fund, but Larned, after this fee fund decrease, will be at about 110,000. So they are, as far as I'm concerned, the budget is the same. They've just used other fees so there was no decrease in the budget.
I was notified last week in regards to the GBA regarding Larned State Hospital, and I've had conversations with Representative Francis and also Chairman Carpenter in regards to that GBA, and so we'll have that GBA distributed out to all the members of the committee when we have the budget discussion in regards to that particular governor's budget adjustment.
And I might add, Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
that was a committee rec that we replaced that money, and the governor beat us to it. So we did recommend that in committee.
All right, thank you. Representative Wolfmore.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. With all these questions swirling around, and I don't know that we have some real clear answers, as you said, I might suggest that we have Laura Howard or whoever the appropriate person in to answer some of these questions and help us put the pieces together at some point, because it really is all connected. Because here was a question I was going to ask, and you may not have the answer to that. That's okay. Has there been any progress on that waiver they were going to submit to the federal government for the IMD exclusion, the Institute for Mental Diseases? Do you have any idea?
I'm not aware of that. We will probably get more information. Again, these are KDADs we hear next week, and I'm sure that's in KDAD's budget. So the hospitals kind of come first, and then we hear KDADs, and the way they intertwine, we'll get that information next week.
That would be important, because it used to be it was a federal law that you were limited to how much Medicaid money you could use in places like Osawatomie, because they were trying to not encourage institutionalization. Well, now the federal government has realized that's causing a problem. So a couple of years ago, or a year ago, I don't know, you can apply for a waiver, and if you're successful, the way I understand it, then you can draw down more Medicaid money to places like Osawatomie. So they're somewhere in the process on that waiver. I just don't know where, but that, as we put these pieces together, that would be pretty important to know. Yeah, that's a couple years off, or we might be able to do that in the next year. All of this connects in the mental health world. What we do with that and what we do with regional hospitals affects what we do with Osawatomie. So anyway, thank you very much.
Sure.
Any further discussion? Representative Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Looking at 22 and the increase of 6 positions, just overall with the decrease, is the decrease entirely on facilities-based things, and are salaries held harmless? Is there any net increase in salaries, or salaries also allotted?
I think they'll get the 2.5% at state, but if you remember I believe it was last December, that the governor did a specific GBA for the Larned State Hospital that raised their pay up significantly more than As a matter of fact, let's see if I can find my pay sheet here. Too much junk.
Well, and again, I think that goes back to Representative Landwehr's statement that she made earlier when you're talking about what the governor had done for Larned State Hospital. We need to look at all of the mental institutions as far as their pay and have that committee set up to, so we have, like I said before, a holistic approach on making sure that all the mental hospitals are equalized in regards to pay. And so, Chairman Carpenter.
Yes, here's my pay sheet here. For instance, an MHDD tech at KNI makes $12.35 an hour. At Parsons State Hospital, $12.35 an hour. At Larned State Hospital, they make $16.16. And then at Osh, Adair, it's $13.95. So those are some of the problems. I mean, that's why I'm not interested in any kind of increase. They're, as far as I'm concerned, with the other hospitals, they're way out of whack. And if you remember, it's kind of similar to what happened with KDOC. They're doing the same job, you know, and we all got pounded last year when KDOC did that, only for El Dorado and specific. Well, you know, we all got all kinds of emails because the guy at Ellsworth is doing the same exact job and is just as much danger as the guy in El Dorado, but yet El Dorado, because of its proximity to Wichita, got another, which I don't argue that. It's a different market, but I'm just telling you that's what you run into.
There's even more evidence why we need to have an analysis done in regards to the pay in the state mental hospitals. Representative Hoffman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just going back to the fee fund, just, did you say that the governor's GBA fixes this issue with the fee fund going down?
No, it does not.
Oh, okay.
No.
So what's the plan of action? Did they not have one, or?
Not that I'm aware of. You can see they get in, let's see, what is it, $3-4 million a year in fee funds. It's on page,
Yeah, it's 326. Is that what you're talking about?
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it goes down drastically.
Yeah, and you can see we've just been overspending them. They get in the revenue $4.2 million, and when you take out $4.7 million, you know, you start to eat into that fee fund.
Okay.
So we've just been supplementing, you know, SGF with fee funds.
So what happens next year? I mean,
I'm dealing with this year.
okay. All right.
I share your concern.
I mean, it's because though we took in looks like in 21, or was it 22, we took SGF money, reduced SGF money, so they had to increase money into their out of
Exactly.
the fee fund, right?
Exactly.
Okay, and that was a big jump in 21, and it looks like 22 went down a little bit. Am I right?
Right.
Okay.
And that's how the governor's pulling SGF money out of their budget and recommending that they supplement it with the fee fund.
And I'm not sure that the fee fund needs to be huge, but I mean, down to 100,000, that is a concern.
Well, on Parsons, it's zero.
Okay.
So it's not just these hospitals here. It's also, Osh has, I think, a pretty good balance in theirs, but in Parsons, there's a zero.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr.
Any further discussion? The only thing that I would mention, and I'm going to make a motion that we analyze the governor's budget adjustment in regards to Larned State Hospital, just to make sure that we don't have that lost, and we revisit it when we have the budget discussion. So that's my motion to include the GBA that we received in regards to Larned State Hospital and have analysis of that when we're discussing the budget. Second by Representative Helgerson. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? All right, motion passes. Any further discussion? Seeing none, Chairman Carpenter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move that we approve the budgets for the state institutions for mental health for 2021 and 2022 as amended.
Committee, you've heard the motion, second by Representative Ballard. All those in favor, say aye. Opposed? No. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. Motion passes. Representative Helgerson would like to have his no vote recorded. All right. Chairman
Thank you,
Carpenter,
committee.
I believe you're done. So we'll move on to the next Budget Committee report outs, and that is from the Agricultural and Natural Resources Budget Committee. And so I'd invite Chairman Corbett to the podium, and then please indicate which agency you're starting with first and the volume and page number.
Thank you, Chairman and Committee. Looks like Volume 3, page 1524. We're going to start out with the Board of Accountancy.
Okay, proceed.
So for 21, the agency requests for FY21 a revised estimate of operating expenditures of $420,478 from the accountancy fee fund. The request is the same as the agency for 21 approved amount. The agency requests 3 FTE positions, the same as the approved number. And the governor concurred, and so did the committee.
I'm not seeing any questions, so just move on.
Okay, this will be 22. The agency request for 22 operating expenditures for 2976 from the accountancy fund, an increase of 20,498, or 4.9% above 21. The increase is due to overlapping salary and health insurance benefits, director's replacement and rent, and it looks like they're asking for 3 FTEs, the same numbers in 21. The governor concurred and the committee concurred.
All right, committee, any questions for Chairman Corbett? Not seeing any, we'll entertain a motion for the Board of Accountancy.
23?
Oh, you have 23. Go on to 23.
Okay. This is for 23. The agency request for 23, 443,348 for dollars, an increase of 2,372 or 0.5%. Same for the FTE positions as in 22, and the governor concurred, and so did the committee.
Okay, I apologize for that, Chairman Corbett. Any discussion in regards to fiscal year 21, 22, or 23? Seeing none, Chairman Corbett.
I move that the budget recommendation for the Board of Accountancy for 21, 22, and 23 be approved by the Appropriations Committee.
All right, you've heard the motion. There is a second by Representative Carlin. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Chairman Corbett.
Next up is the State Bank Commissioner. It's Volume 3, page 1540. For 21, the agency estimates expenditures of $11.2 million from all special revenue funds. It's a decrease of $744,311, or 6.2% below 21. Kind of based upon the COVID and travel. The revised estimate includes 107 FTE positions, which were the same in 21 and approved by the approved number. The governor recommends expenditures of 11.2 from all special revenues from 21. This is a all funds decrease of 12,421, and the decrease is due to the governor's not recommending the agency supplemental request for per diem. And the committee agreed with the governor's recommendation.
There is a following notation, and I believe it falls into fiscal year 21, 22, and 23. In regards to the legislature should review state board member per diem compensation rates and the related governing statutes.
Okay.
I'm just wondering what the discussion was. I mean, the governor did not approve the per diem increase for the state banking commissioner. And I guess what's the direction from the budget committee in regards to that notation in all 3-year budgets?
The budget committee concurred with the governor's recommendation, and it said that the legislature should really review board members' per diem and compensation rates. And one of the things we got into that was it varies quite a bit through all your agencies. So I don't know where you're headed with this, but especially on the next one coming up is board members. Some board members are getting $35 a day and some are getting $1,000. So it was for all the boards that we deal with. So we just kind of let that, we didn't want to change it. We didn't want to do anything that would affect everybody. So we just kind of let that just as a notation.
Okay, thank you. Representative Carlin.
I believe the commissioner told us that she had some open positions on the board. And part of it was due to she wondered if it was due to compensation. At $35 a day, there's a lot of work, and she was having a hard time filling it with qualified members. So, and we did think that throughout the system, $35 a day is still pretty low all over the system and should be looked at. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, thank you for that elaboration. Any further comments or discussion in regards to fiscal year 2021? Seeing none, Chairman Corbett, you may move on to fiscal year 2022.
22. The agency requests $11.7 million from special fund revenues for 22. This is an increase of $532,103 or 4.8% above 21. The revised estimate. This is primarily due to agency budgeting for merit-based salary increases, as well as resumption in some of the in-person events and staffing and educational opportunities. The request for 107 FTEs is 21. The governor recommends expenditures of 11.7 from all special revenue funds for 22. This is the same funds decrease as 12,420 or 0.1% from the agency's request. The decrease is due to the governor's not recommending the agency's enhancement of per diem again. And the committee concurred with the governor's recommendation.
All right, committee, any questions for Chairman Corbett? Seeing none, move on to 2023.
2023, the agency requests $12 million from all special revenue funds for FY23. This is an increase of $236,519 or 0.2% above 22's request. The increase is primarily due to budgeting and merit-based salaries again, as well as anticipating expenditures for in-person events, and primarily staff or education opportunities may be returning after pre-COVID. Revised estimates still include 107 FTE positions, the same as 22, and the governor recommends expenditures of 11.9 and 12,420, and the committee agreed with the governor's recommendations.
All right, any questions? Representative Rogers.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm looking at performance measures, and I appreciate performance-based budgeting. I'm looking here, the number of problem banks is a percentage of all banks. In 2018, 4.6%. The governor, possible for fiscal year 2022, 17.3. Did that get brought up at all, discussion? I mean, that's where I guess, I appreciate the performance-based, but I think sometimes we just pull these numbers out of the air. And, to me, if 17.3% of all banks in Kansas were going to become problem banks, does anybody read this stuff? I guess am I being overreactive?
No, actually, I was going to make a comment in regards to performance measures as well. You and I think alike, because if you look at page 1545, I think we have some troubling trends here. If you look at, just the number of state chartered banks has gone down from 2018 to the recommendation for 2021. The number of problem banks, the percentage has increased starkly. Assets keep going up. And then if you look at the number of consumer and mortgage lending inquiries, I mean, we dropped almost 400 between the governor's recommendation for 2020 and the actual. And so I think there is some trends there that we need to analyze.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, either the numbers are just pie in the sky, or there's a concern that we need to be aware of. Not, I know that's not necessarily the role of this committee. You're looking at the working of it, but if those numbers, if those numbers are true, I mean, I understand, bank consolidation and so on. I think we had one bank failure in 2020 in the state. But other than that, I mean, I look at that and I'm going, wow. I mean, that's. I guess I don't want to belabor the fact, but I'm not sure if we need to talk to someone with the Kansas Bankers Association or somebody to know if I mean, it just, it just is really concerning.
Well, and I agree with you, because I was looking at the performance measures myself. Maybe we do need to have the state banking commissioner give us an update. I mean, are those numbers decreasing as far as the number of state chartered banks? Obviously, they've been trending since 2018 as lower, so you can't blame the COVID-19 pandemic for that. But is the rate increase for the problem banks, is that due to the pandemic, or is that due to something else? And I think we do need to have a discussion, because I did find that interesting, looking at page 1545 as to the trend of what's going on with the state banks.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Estes.
I'm glad we're on this topic, because as I've anecdotally interacted with folks from banking industry, they're giving me troubling trends that they see on their customer base, and a drastic increase in the higher number of late credit card payments, mortgage defaults, and I think it's wise of us to dig in and see what's going on and how we might position ourselves moving forward if some of these worst case scenarios and trends decline.
Well, and I appreciate those comments, because one thing, I know Representative Wolfmore, myself, we were on the Spark committee, and also we discussed the moratorium that has been put on in regards to evictions or foreclosures. And I had a grave concern that we are setting ourselves up for another financial crisis like we did in 2008, when we have a moratorium on the foreclosures and individuals are not able to make their mortgage payments, but the foreclosure cannot move forward. And when that moratorium expires, we could find ourselves with numerous foreclosures going on, not only in the state, but the nation. And being in the banking industry in 2008, I have grave concerns of what we might be setting ourselves up for when this pandemic is over. We could be setting ourselves up for a financial crisis again.
Anecdotally, I've been told that normally we run between 1% and 2% on a default rate, and right now, that last time I checked, it was around 17%. So I'd like to know if those numbers are true, and what it looks like for us as a state.
And like I said, we could have the state banking commissioner or the Kansas Bankers Association. We can have a discussion on this, because it's not really pertaining to the budget itself. It's just trying to figure out exactly what's going on in the banking industry.
One of the reasons why the numbers were down, they said and testified that just a lot of consolidations. So whatever, but.
Representative Rogers kind of mentioned that too, that we have consolidations going on throughout the state, and then one failure, but and that could be an explanation. But obviously, a dialogue that we need to have with the state banking commissioner or the Kansas Bankers Association. Representative Owens.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I wanted to just chime in on that. Actually working on a banking bill that I've had the opportunity to study some of these things. A couple of thoughts. One, yeah, consolidation is huge. We saw both of our local banks in Newton get merged into larger banks. And the primary reason for that is the regulatory burden that they're under. The smaller banks simply cannot keep up with all the regulations, and so it's forcing them to merge. I think the other thing that's playing a big role in this is internet banking, and just how convenient and easy it is for people to set up accounts and to do everything online. And that's playing into a decrease in the bricks and mortar in our communities and community banking. It's been a frustration of mine for many years that the personal relationship with bankers has basically went out of the window as a result of regulation, basically. So just wanted to chime in there and would love to learn more about that. But I think trends are trending to a significant decrease in state banks and national banks being on the ground in Kansas.
All right, any further comments for Chairman Corbett? Seeing none, Chairman Corbett.
Thank you, Chairman. I move that the budget recommendations for the offices of the State Bank for 21, 22, and 23 be approved by the Appropriations Committee.
Committee, you've heard the motion, second by Representative Carlin. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Chairman Corbett.
The next one is the Department of Credit Unions, Volume 3, page 1637. For 21, the agency revised estimates for $1.3 million from all special revenue funds. For 21, this is a decrease of $18,621, or 1.5% below the FY 2021 approved amount. The decrease is primarily due to the decreased travel expenditures resulting from COVID. Let's see. The agency originally planned to fill the vacancies in 20, however, was difficulty finding qualified candidates. The FTEs are 12, same in 21. The governor concurs with the revised estimates, and the committee concurred with the governor's recommendation.
Why don't you go ahead and move on to 2022 and 2023?
Okay. 2022. The agency requests $1.3 million from all special revenue funds from FY22. This is a decrease of $55,479, or 4.4% above the FY21 revised estimate. The increase is due to the agent's budgeting for 4.5 to 5% staff salary increases for 22. The salary increases were due in part for the effort to retain experienced staff. And the request also includes 12 FTE positions, the same as 21. The governor's recommendations were $1.3 million from all special revenue funds for 22. This is an all funds decrease of $46,693, or 3.5% below the agency's request. The decrease was due to the governor's recommendation of not including the agency staff salary increases for 22. And however, the agency was included in the governor's pay plan for executive branch employees. And the budget committee concurred with the governor's recommendations for 22. 23. The agency requests $1.3 million from all special revenue funds for FY23. This is the same as the FY22 requested amount. While the overall budget remains the same, the agency projects contributions to the group health to increase. Their increase is offset by travel. Still request 12-point FTEs, the same as 22. And the governor recommends $1.3 million from all special revenue funds for 23. The same as all funds decrease is $46,606, or 3.5% below the agency's request. However, the agency's was included in the governor's pay for the executive branch employees, and the budget committee concurred with the governor's recommendation for 23.
Committee, any questions for Chairman Corbett in regards to fiscal years 21, 22, or 23, the credit unions? Representative Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And the governor's pay plan for executive branch employees, does that pretty well keep salaries in line just by looking at that? What I was looking at we had a 4 to 5% increase in salaries that was stated in 21, and it looks like we had a pretty big increase coming into 21. And I'd assume that those were salaries. There may have been something else there, but the increase looked like it may have been higher than in other areas.
Hang on. Representative, the first one was just an increase of employees, and your second question was on the governor's, why it would be higher. Once they increase the number or whatever in employees, the raise would be included on everybody. Go ahead.
Representative Johnson.
Sorry to waste much time on this. It looks like the FTEs were fairly consistent. Is there, I was trying to catch the number.
So the question would be they were vacant at one time and then filled.
Committee, any further questions for Chairman Corbett? Representative Rogers.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And to kind of piggyback on the conversation with the bankers, could we bring in somebody from the credit unions too? Because there's a different set of performance measures for the banks to the credit unions, and I'd just be kind of curious of the status and strength of credit unions in Kansas, because, and I know there's been a few others that have, but I just think that as we look at the whole situation, and I appreciate the representative from Heston, what he said, but my greater concern is problem banks, and I mean, numbers obviously are going to change, but if we could, you know, as we look at bringing somebody and talk about banks, we could also talk about credit unions and their strength.
I completely agree. We'll have all financial institutions throughout the state.
Thank you.
We'll have a discussion on that. Representative Sutton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I believe that the bill that we passed out of the House yesterday standardizes performance measurements between banks and credit unions. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you for that interesting comment. Committee, any questions or comments for Chairman Corbett in regards to the credit unions? All right, seeing none, Chairman Corbett.
Thank you, Chairman. I move that the budget recommendations for the Department of Credit Unions for 21, 22, and 23 be approved by the Appropriations Committee.
All right, committee, you've heard the motion. Second by Representative Carlin. All those in favor say aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Chairman Corbett.
Thank you, Chairman. Next is the Department of Commerce, Volume 2, page 1418. Yeah, so it's Volume 2, page 1418.
All right, proceed.
The agency requests $270.1 million, including $6.9 million from SGF for 21. This request is an all funds increase of $162.8 million, or 151.1%, and the SGF decrease of $5 million, or 42.1% from the approved amount. The SGF increase is attributable to the $5 million in funding approved by the Legislative Coordinating Council for Job Creation program funds, sequential with the submission of the budget. Special revenue fund increased $138.6 million received by the Federal Relief Fund, which supports connectivity emergency response grants, program, business retention and expansion grants, local food service grants, cybersecurity, advanced manufacturing grants. The increase is also attributable to $18.3 million in community development block grants, which is $16.9 million is from the CARES Act funding. In addition to the federal funding increases, the agency also requested an additional $2.9 million in operating cost. The operating funds increase for information and technology expenditures related in an incentive database and web updates of $1.9 million, and salaries and wages of $959,815 from filling vacant positions in the administration program. The new federal employment data exchange grant, as well as hiring the Main Street and Strong Military Base program. The agency revised estimates for capital improvements of $225,000 from the special revenue funds in 21. And the agency requests a decrease of $100,000 or 30.8% below the FY21 approved budget. The reduction is attributed to delaying capital improvement projects for 1 year. The number of FTEs is 296.3, an increase of 3.3 FTEs above the 21 approved FTE number. The revised estimates is due to new positions, but reflects the FY 2020 actual FTE count. The governor's recommendations expenditures were $319.1 million, including $11.9 million SGF from all funds increase of $49 million, or an 18.1%, and an 18 and a SGF increase of $5 million, or 72.7% above the agency's 21 request. SGF increase is attributable to the addition of $5 million allocated for State Finance Council and Job Creation Program Fund, and other funds increases total $44 million, as attributable to the addition of $40 million in small business assistance and $5 million in SRF funds. The increase is partially offset by $1 million to reference the investments in the major projects and comprehensive training bonds. The governor concurs with the budget, and the committee concurred with the governor's recommendations.
Committee, any questions for Chairman Corbett in regards to fiscal year 2021? Representative Hoffman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Job Creation Fund, did you guys have a discussion on how much is in that fund now? Over the interim, we added at least is it just $5 million into that fund, and they were expecting to use most of it. Yeah, they wanted 25. They're expecting to use most of it. So do we know how much is in that fund at this point?
I don't know. Hang on a minute. Chairman, could we go on? He'll look that up, or do you want to wait?
We can revisit that, because I'm kind of interested in that as well, because as the Vice Chair mentioned, when we had the joint legislative budget committee meetings, there were numerous requests by the Department of Commerce for additional funds to go into the Job Creation Fund from the fund of the Coronavirus Relief Fund that we passed in the budget last year. Like we said, the initial request was $25 million. We went ahead and had approval by the LCC of $5 million. So we'd just kind of like to see what the balance is and how they're utilizing those funds that we put in there. Representative Carlin, did you have a comment?
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. I was just noticing my notes from the committee. We do have that report from the Department of Commerce, but I'm not seeing the balance in the fund. But I'm not sure if I can say it's the balance in the fund. But it does talk about, I do have a report from them. I could provide it if you want copies.
Be good. Thank you, Representative Carlin. All right, seeing no further comments, Chairman Corbett.
Thank you, Chairman. This will be 22. The agency requests $96.2 million from all special revenue funds for FY 2022. The agency requests $95.9 million in operating expenditures for 22. The operating request for all funds decrease of $174 million, or 64.5%, from the FY21 revised estimates. The decrease is primarily a one-time federal funds expenditures from 21 from the COVID pandemic relief. That's including Community Development Block Grant, CARES Act for $16.9 million, and $136 million from the endowment, and they expanded the National Endowment Arts for $342,600. The agency also estimates reductions in other assistance of $8.1 million from the Jobs Creation Program Fund and fund from expanded funding in 21. $1.4 million reduced grants from EDIF due to the exhaustion of funding sources, and a reduction of $550,000 from the Impact Program Services Fund due to the exhaustion of funding. The agency requests for capital improvement expenditures, $330,000 from all special revenue funds for 22. The agency requests an increase of $105,000, or a 46.7% above 21 agency request. The increase is attributable to the cost of replacing an elevator at the Topeka Workforce Center and relative to roof and other repairs to the building. The agency request is 296.3 FTE, the same as 21. The governor's recommendations of $99.8 million, including $10,000 SGF, is in all funds an increase of $3.6 million, or 3.7% above the 22 agency request. The governor also recommends an additional $10,000 SGF for moving expenditures. The increase is attributed to recommendations to move the tourism division from the Kansas Wildlife and Parks to Commerce. The move includes $3 million from Tourism and Travel Fund and $1.6 million from EDIF and 12 positions. The increase is partially offset by a reduction of $1 million from all special revenue and refinance the impact bonds. The governor concurs with the 22 request, and the committee concurs with the governor's recommendation.
Chairman Tarwater, do you have an update on the ERO 48 to move tourism into commerce?
I do not.
Thank you. I just thought we'd have that discussion since we're talking about moving the tourism budget from the Department of Wildlife, Parks, and Tourism into the Department of Commerce. Representative Sutton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm trying to get a grasp on this job creation fund and this job creation program fund. And 2021 showed an increase of $5 million SGF spending for the fund, and I certainly can understand that part. But then we get into 2022, and we reduce the assistance by $8.1 million. Would it be easier to just reduce it by 3.1 and not add the $5 million? What is it that I'm missing in this process?
Chairman Corbett.
Representative, that was kind of like a carryover dollars.
The $5 million in 2021 was carryover?
It was budgeted all in 21 and then carried over from there.
So I think the water's murkier now than it was when I started. It kind of starts that way, doesn't it? All right, so we added $5 million in 21. It carried over to 22 as 8.1 million. So we only spent 1.9 million of the, help me out here, throw me a bone. I'm on 1430. Reductions in other assistance of 8.1.
So Chairman and Representative, 5 million was transferred in, well, actually it was almost 10 million. And for the hire program and whatever whatever was left over, somewhat like that.
Well, I believe the automatic transfer into the job creation fund is at 3.5 million. And then we did an additional 5.
Right.
And the discussion that we had in the Joint Legislative Budget Committee when they came with the request of 25 million was that we had an additional appropriation above the 3.5 million in fiscal year 2021. And they had obligations. Now, they weren't obviously confirmed, but they had obligations out there for businesses to come to the state of Kansas using this fund to entice businesses to come. With all the obligations that they had, that fund was diminished quite a bit.
Right.
And so that's why the Joint Legislative Budget Committee sought approval from the Legislative Coordinating Council for the $5 million to keep that fund solvent.
Okay.
And so there's an automatic deposit into that account of $3.5 million. The $5 million, I'm assuming it's unobligated. And that was, I believe, in the August meeting that we had with the Joint Legislative Budget Committee, and it was approved by the LCC in September.
Okay. And then the 8.1 is just lapsed from the previous year? The 8.1 reduction in 2022?
That'd be a question for Chairman Corbett. Thing that I would also note, we had a discussion with the Department of Commerce in regards to the additional funds that they were requesting for the Job Creation Fund. All of the states around us that have a similar fund to entice businesses, the reason why they were asking for 25 million is because all of the other states have a substantially higher balance, which as far as marketing for businesses to come into each particular state, they have more leverage. And that was an argument that the Department of Commerce was making as to the reason why they wanted they were requesting the 25 million. In fact, I believe, although it's completely different, the economy with the state of Kansas, but the state of Texas, if I recall, and I can pull the document, what they provided for us, but I think the state of Missouri was like 48 million, the state of Oklahoma was 42 million, the state of Texas was like 1-point-something billion that they have to entice businesses into their state. And the state of Kansas right now, we're sitting at I just got a note here from the Department of Commerce, we're sitting with the Job Creation Fund with an unobligated balance of about $15 million. So if you look at it that perspective, we are not leveraging ourselves as well as we could in regards to the other states surrounding us. I believe the state of Colorado is about 100 million. I can get that document that was provided for us back in July or August and
Senate
have that
passed
for
out
committee.
Yesterday. That ERO was passed out of Commerce and Senate yesterday.
Chairman Corbett?
One comment, the ERO passed out, I believe, the Senate Commerce yesterday. So
For approval?
yes.
Okay.
So
most likely, we will be merging the Department or Tourism into the Department of Commerce.
Yeah.
Representative Tarwater.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On the Job Creation Fund, if my memory serves me correctly, the $10 million in loans that the Department of Commerce put out for the hospitality industry, I believe came out of that fund. I think. So that was a $10 million reduction. It was 5? Okay, it was 5. But my question here is the EDIF funds. There was an audit done last year that showed that we are absolutely not following statute from the Lottery Act for these funds. And it appears that they're continuing to use these funds for operating the Department of Commerce rather than for spurring small business, which is what it was created for. And one of the greatest needs that we uncovered in the interim committee this summer was we need to find new ways to help our citizens start new businesses. And I would like to see these funds used for that because that's what they were earmarked for in the Lottery Act. That's just a statement.
And that's duly noted because we had a conversation last year in regards, after that audit came out, with the EDIF money that is dispersed across the state, many other organizations and departments and agencies, not just the Department of Commerce. And in reference to that audit that was performed in regards to EDIF, the largest violation that we had was about $17 million going into the state general fund. And so we do need to have an analysis and make sure that when the Lottery Act was passed in 1987 with the intended monies from the lottery going towards economic development, that is being used for that purpose. Any further questions for Chairman Corbett? All right, seeing none, Chairman Corbett.
I move that the budget recommendations for the Department of Commerce for 21 and 22 be approved by the Appropriations Committee.
Committee, you heard the motion by Chairman Corbett, second by Representative Carlin. All those in favor say aye. Opposed? Motion passes. I believe you're done, Chairman Corbett. So now we'll turn it over to K through 12 Education Budget Committee reports. And so I will ask Chairperson Williams to give us an update on the School for the Blind and the School for the Deaf.
Okay, let's start with School for the Blind. And if you open up the volume 2, page 852. And I'm just going to give you some background information while you're flipping to page 852. The Kansas State School for the Blind is located in Kansas City. The mission of the Kansas State School for the Blind, which includes 38 students on campus and 777 students statewide, is to provide programs and vision services for those students up to the age of 21 with visual impairments. KSSB continues to create valuable partnerships with schools and parents and communities to help those who are visually impaired so they can assume active, responsible, and contributing lives. KSSB is a state agency under the control and supervision of the State Board of Education. For fiscal year 2021, the agency recommends a revised estimate of $7,795,892. This includes $5.7 million from the State General Fund in fiscal year 2021. This is $56,965, or 0.7% above what the legislature approved in 2020. This increase also in special revenue can be attributed to monies that were lapsed due to not needing the budgeted amount, which is about $5,996, and the addition of fees received from other agencies and school districts. These changes are within no-limit funds, which require no legal action by the legislature, except for the State Institution Building Fund lapse of funds. Oh, and there was a lapse of $9 from the State General Fund due to COVID. So they $9 savings. Good job. The revised budget includes an operating budget of $6.9 million, including $5.7 from SGF, the all funds increase of $62,951, or 0.9% above approved amount. For the capital improvement expenditures portion, the agency recommends, as mentioned above, a reduction of $5,986 of State Institution Building Fund they didn't need. So that was the agencies, and the governor recommends total expenditures of $8.25 million, including $5.74 million in SGF in fiscal year 2021. This is a federal funds increase of $457,649. That would be Sparks COVID money that was used for ionization capital improvement expenses, I think that's HVAC, and IT costs related to remote learning, Braille and other visually impaired expenses for that remote learning. So positions remain at 81.5. The Budget Committee concurs with the governor's recommendation. Mr. Chairman, I can proceed to 2022 or pause for questions.
Go ahead and go on to 2022.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For fiscal year 2022, we have the agency recommendations. Their operating budget of $6.9 million, including $5.8 million SGF for fiscal year 2022. The operating budget is an all funds increase of $54,484 or 0.8% above fiscal year 2021. So the SGF went up, mostly attributable to increases in wages and benefits. The special revenue fund decreased by 3.4%. Just a reminder that these two budgets that I'm doing today are tied when the teachers are tied with Olathe Public School District raises. It's not a percentage this year, and so that's automatically included in there. That doesn't require action, by the way. Note. Just said that. The agency requests capital improvement expenditures of $919,000, all from State Institution Building Fund. This is a $2,427 decrease, or 2.3% below 2021, due to completion of some projects. They secured their breezeway, which left money for their life safety systems and equipment. The governor concurs with the agency requests for 2022, and the committee concurs with the governor's recommendation for 2022. So I will stand for questions on the fiscal year 2021-22 budgets for the school for the deaf.
Committee, blind.
I'm sorry?
The blind, right?
Yes, sorry, blind.
Committee, any questions for Chairperson Williams? Representative Wolfmore.
Thank you. Maybe I'm looking at the wrong thing. I thought you added 3 recommendations for 2022.
I believe you're on the deaf.
Sorry, and if I said
they're
deaf, I
connected.
meant blind, and it's
You are
blind.
right. They're connected.
But we will
Thank you
definitely
very
get to that
much.
next.
Thank you so much.
Any further questions for Chairperson Williams? Seeing none, you may move your motion.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move the committee recommendations for the 2021 and 2022 budget years. No amendments.
Committee, for the motion, is there a second? Second by Representative Tarwater. All those in favor say aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Now we'll move on to the School for the Deaf.
Yes. Okay, so for the 2021, it'll be pretty easy. The 2022, we'll get into those recommendations with explanations definitely needed. So thank you, Mr. Chairman. Committee, please refer to the Kansas State School for the Deaf budget in Volume 2, page 873. Should just be right around the corner from where we were. Located in Olathe, the mission of the Kansas State School for the Deaf is to ensure deaf and hard of hearing, which we call DHH students, achieve their full potential. The School for the Deaf has 153 students enrolled on their campus and serves 133 school districts, cooperative service centers up to the age of 21. The list of services provided by KSSD is extensive, including speech-language therapy, language assessments, and providing equipment and consultative services for those deaf or hard of hearing. KSSD is a state agency under the control and supervision of the State Board of Education. So for fiscal year 2021, the agency recommends a revised estimate of $11.8 million, including $9.4 million from the SGF in fiscal year 2021. This is an all funds decrease of $216,000 or 1.8%, and an SGF decrease of $401 below what was approved last year in 2020. The 402 SGF was swapped to all funds and was a PPE purchase using Sparks money from federal coronavirus funds. The revised estimate maintains the 143.5 FTE positions. This revised estimate includes an operating budget of $10.4 million. So the governor recommends the total expenditures of $12.2 million, including $9.4 million SGF in fiscal year 2021. This is an all funds increase of $440,000 or 3.7 above agency's estimate, which is attributable to the Office of Recovery allocating federal coronavirus relief funds, SPARK. The governor recommends 143.5 FTE positions, same as the agency requested. The governor's recommendation includes operating expenditures of $10.7 million, including $9.4 from SGF. This is an all funds decrease of $320,000 or 3.2. Again, it all goes back to those federal dollars for COVID-related expenditures. Big one was the ionization project that so many institutions are doing. The governor recommends including a capital improvement budget of $1.5 million, all from the special revenue funds in 2021, and that's the State Institutions Building Fund, which is an all funds increase of $119,283 or 8.6%. These additional expenditures are also Spark monies for distance learning IT equipment. So I may have misspoke right before. Budget Committee recommendations concurs with the agency and governor's recommendation. So this is 2021. If you'd like, we can move to 2022.
Go ahead and proceed to 2022.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. The agency requests, I'm going to pull this out here. The agency requests $12.2 million, including $10.1 million SGF for 2022. This is an all funds increase of $428,000 or 3.6% above fiscal year 2021 revised estimate. It includes the 143.5 positions. The agency request includes an operating budget of $11 million with 10.1 SGF for 22. This is an all funds increase of $623,516 or 6% more, and an SGF increase of $626,000 or 6.6 above the previous year. This increase is primarily attributed to the agency's enhancement requests for the language assessment plan, which we'll talk about in a minute, LAP, which is now entering phase 3 and does also include a full-time housekeeping position that was unfilled. So that shrinkage rate, per Representative Sutton's comments, changes, number goes down. The agency request includes a capital improvement budget of $1.2 million, all from the State Institutions Building Fund for 2022. This is a 14.1 decrease below 2021's revised estimate. The decrease is due to the completion of the Roth building renovations. Okay, so note the implementation of the language assessment program. I definitely want us to talk about that. We've had a discussion last year about that, so we can come back and I will go into detail about it, but let me go to the governor's recommendation.
That's fine.
All right. The governor does not concur with the agency's plan for the language assessment program of $466,658. This is an all funds decrease of $466,658 below the agency's request. The governor recommends total expenditures of $11.6 million, including $9.6 for the SGF for fiscal year 2022. This is an all funds decrease of $637,685 or 5.2%, and an SGF decrease of the $466, which is the language assessment plan. 143.5 positions maintained. So the governor's recommendation includes operating expenditures of the 10.5 and 9.6 for the SGF. The governor's recommendation includes a capital improvement budget of $1 million, all from the SIBF for 2022. And that's a decrease of $171,000 or 14% below the agency's request, which we'll talk about. So the agency had requested all through the state SIBF fund that they have a new soft surface for their playground that's ADA compliant for the children. I think that some of the playground equipment was privately donated, or there was some kind of cost share in this cost sharing this West Campus playground. But the governor denied the ADA $171,000 for the soft surface. So now to the House budget recommendations. And so if you make sure you have those recommendations handy, I will go through those. The Budget Committee concurs with the governor's recommendations for fiscal year 2022 with the following adjustments. Number one, we added the $171,027, all from the state institutions building fund, to upgrade the West Campus playground for fiscal year 2022. This upgrade would replace the current elementary playground surface and equipment with an ADA-compliant playground, including DuraSafe rubber tiles and the underlying infrastructure. And in explanation, in committee, we had a member that is part of this State Institutions Building Fund Committee, and they had just passed or approved for this funding that we didn't know about, that wasn't included in the report. And because it is not state general funds money, it's SIBF, it does not impact our state general fund, our committee approved it. I can stand for question on that, or just keep moving on the 2-3.
Keep moving on, and we'll come back.
Number two, add language directing the Kansas State Department of Education to expend funds from the Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief Fund received under the Federal Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act, or the Federal Coronavirus Response and Relief Supplemental Appropriations Act for the implementation of Phase 3 of the Language Assessment Program. Or, if those funds may not be used to implement such a program, to expend funds from other existing resources for fiscal year 2022. We also asked on item number 3, and I will explain that, the Budget Committee recommends that the Kansas State Department of Education report to the House Committee on K-12 Education Budget on February 15th, which will likely be February 16th now, 2021, the funding sources that shall be used to implement Phase 3 of the Language Assessment Program for fiscal year 2022, noted item 2 above. So before I take your questions, I think it would be appropriate to explain the committee's thinking and where this came from. Last year, when we presented this to you, it was something that we were going to put off until omnibus. It was something that was communicated to us, or we understood, whichever way is right or wrong, that it was a legislative priority and it was a legislative action that put the language plan in place in 2016. It was unanimous in the House and Senate at that time, 2015 or 2016, can't remember. And it was not funded last year, and we were going to take a look in omnibus. And then COVID hit, so we did not get a second glance at that. So this year, looking at it, it appears that the governor does think it's a valuable program. The governor wants to support the program, but wonders if there's a more efficient place to place it. And one suggestion was under the Children's Cabinet, which is part of that is in the Department of Education's budget. And we know that that particular, the Children's Cabinet, or however that's divided out, received additional $40 million for different things, remote learning, and I'm not even sure the scope of what they received, but they received about $40 million. And then we also know that the Department of Education received in one pot of money, $36 million to be expended from their budget for things that could be COVID-related. Sometimes these things can be supplanted from other areas in your budget because there's a lot of overlap. We noticed that as we were looking through it. So because the thought was that it could shift to the Children's Cabinet, and that there may be some efforts, there may be some things that are already being done that we want, because this is primarily for young children. They're getting assessed on their hearing. So if we could commingle that, it would actually expedite the movement rather than us funding it separately or not funding it at all. We move it to where it looks like it was unofficially recommended or considered to go. And so that's why we did that. So I'm going to pause and stand for questions.
Committee, any questions for Chairwoman Williams? Representative Wolfmore.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Okay, so I have questions on number 2. So it sounds like what you're saying, if it can't be paid for out of COVID relief money, which I'm kind of doubtful, and that 40 million that went to the Children's Cabinet for Remote Learning, if I'm correct, I think then they pushed 23 back to another, they didn't keep the whole 40 million for remote learning. That got repurposed. Wasn't that correct, Mr. Chairman?
Believe so, but Chairwoman Williams, do you have a response?
So we're waiting to hear back from the Department of Education, and that would have been February 15th, but likely will be the 16th. So we have not heard a response.
And that would probably have to be COVID-related, which this is, I'm not arguing with the value of the program. It probably won't fit there. So, and maybe you said this and I didn't get it. So what would be the existing resources, possibilities? So another type of fund in Children's Cabinet, is that what you're thinking?
It could be there. It would be up to the Department of Education budget. Because if you look through all of the, for example, 15 different criteria that are provided for the ESSER funds, and I don't know specifically for the Children's Cabinet, but in general, it will say things about health and safety. It will say things about continuous learning, and there's a lot of items, mental health, there's a lot of items that, yes, the schools may be and should be monitoring attendance, let's say, as an example, but you can use COVID money to monitor attendance. So in reality, it's almost supplanable funds, because it's things that they're going to do, but they should already be doing, but maybe they're ramping up, maybe they're not. So we believe that there's a lot of federal dollars right now. It seems like a reasonable request that $466,000 of unappropriated money from the governor's budget that we could realistically ask the Department of Education to look for a way to make that happen.
And I have one last question. So is that a one-time expense, since that ESSER money's one time, or is that an ongoing every year appropriation, or is it?
So the way the program phases in, they had a 5-year phase in, and the first 2 years, they did not ask for any additional funds from us. They absorbed the cost, and this was the biggest year of getting it going. From there, the next phase would be $192,000 and then $199,000 on top of that. So you're going to have ongoing costs with this because you have specialists that are doing the assessment. But I think to get the program up, that's why the boost was so much. And I can double check if you want more information on that.
That's helpful. Thank you very much.
Representative Carlin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, one of my questions was, are we discussing the 466,000, which Representative Wolfborn mentioned and you verified? Is this language assessment, is that so that we can diagnose for the school?
Yes, but it's actually 0 to 5. So you're doing assessments, you're going into the communities, you're evaluating, hearing. It could be in the school, it could be in early childhood, could be in other situations too.
Or in home visits from home health, et cetera. That's a very good plan. And then one more thing is this, when you think about moving it into the Children's Cabinet, is that because of the funding that comes in every year and it gives you an ongoing source of funding?
And oversight. Perhaps it's a better place to put it. If it's not, then, this is just a one-year thing, one-year request, and it could be changed. But that seemed to be the direction that I was hearing. It was a question mark. That wasn't a confirmation, this is where we want it. But it was a question, and we didn't want to stall a program, $466,000, while we figure out where it needs to go. So because of the additional federal funding and to put it in the hands of some experts, the Children's Cabinet, we thought that this would be a good time to ask them to step up and start considering this program, fund it for a year, and then moving forward, evaluate maybe a better place if that's not the right place.
And one more thing, and then if there were funds not expended this year, could they roll over in that cabinet? Is that another benefit of doing that?
Norma, is that right? So are you talking about the 466,000 if those funds weren't
Yeah, the
expended?
one-time money, uh-huh.
I know most of it's going to be salaries, and so would it roll over? Could they? Yeah, so that, if they used any of the ESSER monies for it, that's good until 2023.
Only other question then, it sounds good, did the agency have issues with doing that, or were they comfortable with that?
I haven't heard from the agency. They provided hearing, and we asked them specifically about this program, why it wasn't funded. We asked for it, could it be used? Could there be any federal dollars for it? And we have committee members here, so if I misspeak, please correct me. I don't think that they had a recommendation of how it could be funded. I think that their request was just SGF. And I think in our committee, especially right now, post, COVID pandemic or midst of it, we want to look for those federal dollars, even if it's just for 1 year to buy us a little more time. And we see in different department budgets where those dollars are supplanted, whether it's transportation or otherwise, and we just saw a good opportunity to do that. But no, they didn't respond on this, unless I have not been personally
Did
asked.
the Children's Cabinet respond?
No, we have not talked to the Children's Cabinet.
All right, thank you, no more questions. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Wolfmore.
I still, I guess I have a couple questions. So if we can't take it for ESSER money, and, maybe we can, and that would be great. And if we're in a situation where the Children's Cabinet can't do it because they have to sweep funds, they may have to sweep key funds in order to do this, which wouldn't be good. Then would it roll then to SGF?
Yes, so the Department of Education shall fund it. And again, coming back to all the criteria that can be used, there are so many overlaps in how you can use funds. If they could not use this 466 exactly from coronavirus relief funds, I am sure there's 466,000 somewhere in that budget that they could move over and use it for that purpose. That is our thinking. We can't confirm that with you right now, but that is what our committee chose to request.
And to follow up, I feel like I'm voting for something and I don't know where the money's going to come from, or it's SGF. Is there a possibility we could hold off on that one, and then after you have a little further information with the Children's Cabinet I'd feel better about knowing where the money's coming from. I'm not arguing with the program at all.
So I think it would be up to the chairman to determine whether or not he wants to hold a piece, or it might be something that if this were to pass out of committee today and we needed to review it at Omnibus, we could also do that. I don't know how that language would look, and I think that would be up to the chairman.
Well, I'm going to say, Representative Wolfmore, do you have a motion to pull this aside?
Why don't I think there's a couple other people that want to speak and see where they're going with it, and then I may.
All right. Representative Estes.
I was just going to help answer Representative Carlin's question, that they were befuddled why they weren't funded either, and they were just really, really grateful because this is so critical to catch these kids at that age and the damage that happens if we don't catch them. I don't think they're partial to where the funding comes from. That's just my personal sense of the situation.
Representative Buchanan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Chairman Williams.
Yes.
I'm not used to calling you that.
I know.
I think that I certainly would be interested in this program. I really wasn't familiar with it. I too am questioning about the funding, just because not so much of where the funding comes from, but the thought of putting it with the Children's Cabinet. They were just in Children and Seniors this week talking about their programs, and I'm not saying it wouldn't fit, but they have certain types of criteria for the programs that they they fund through their grants. And I just don't know, and I would like to hear from them.
And I would just also say that the recommendation does not direct to Children's Cabinet. It does not, I don't think it specifies that at all. So I was just giving an example of where it might go because it was part of a conversation. It is not part of the recommendation. What we're saying is that the governor did not recommend this to be funded. And we're saying we recommend it to be funded, and we recommend it to be funded out of the Department of Education in some manner. And we specified, first look for federal, second, use resources, because we do think it needs to be funded, and we did not believe that delaying it 1 year while we figure out where's the perfect place, because it may not be the perfect place. It may not be appropriate in there at all.
Okay.
But we want to fund it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Hoffman.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And, you know, I think there were several of us in the committee that were probably ready to just use SGF money for this $466,000. This is the second year that they have asked for this. So, you know, they were on a course, and if I remember rightly, this is mostly for travel and expanded, but more people so that they can expand it into more of the state. It's kind of been going a little bit of a tiered move, I guess. So that was the thought. Was there was many of us that said let's just do this in SGF, and then we looked at it and said, well, let's give the Department of Education the ability to look at it and say, well, we've got some federal money that we think we can use this year, and but our intention was that it gets funded one way or the other, and that's the reason why we put in there that they will use existing funds if they can't. And as far as with the agency, I mean, they had the School of the Blind, they had no other recourse but just to say we want it out of SGF because that's all they had available to them. So, you know, when we get ready to do the budget for the Department of Education in a couple of weeks, my hope is that, you know, we told them pretty specifically in this, we want to know where you're going to get this money from, and that's where I feel like we'll get maybe a few more answers when they come to us for their budget. So, but this is, I think this is so important, and you know, to me, $466,000 to help these kids is, you know, pretty small amount, especially when we look at a $4 billion K-12 budget, and then we're worried about $466 to really help some kids. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And Mr. Chairman, may I also make a comment about that? Since we haven't, this should comfort the committee, since we haven't done the Department of Education budget, and since it comes to this committee for, you know, approval, if, for example, the committee didn't like how they had to shuffle funds, or we have that budget next. You could add $466,000 on top of it if this committee wanted to. This is a singular budget. We're recommending that piece be put on the Department of Ed. So you don't have, this is not your last shot at this, because you will see the big one.
Representative Ballard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think we've answered the question, because I wondered if, since education was going to come up next, if it could not be part of that conversation, because you've made it clear that this is an important program for you. And I was going to ask, did you consider putting SGF for, you answered that question for me, but then I was going to, other was, what about education if that's where it was? Because when you said Children's Cabinet, I was a little concerned, but then you clarified that you didn't mean it. You used it as an example. Yes. And it seems to me that if this program is that valuable, and I agree with you, I feel that it is, it needs to be funded, and that's what I heard. But on the other hand, even though you say there's a $4 million budget for education, just, you know, it's like, okay, you got the money, so you do it. And so what happens often, which I think you know happens, I don't want to do it, but you do it. I say it's important, but you should fund it. So I think at some point we have to decide, how important is it? Do we want to put SGF as the last result, or if they, or do we really want them to fund it? Okay, I think those are two different questions.
I think those are valid concerns. As we talk about it, it gets a little confusing when we make this type of recommendation. I think the recommendation is meant to say, let's hold off on SGF for this particular budget. Let's provide the Department of Education that received almost $600 million in totality, 36 for their own agency, 40 for the cabinet, may or may not be relevant. Let's give them an opportunity. Let's be thinking of ways that we can, reduce that SGF. And so that's the thought, and it will come up in our budget. And if our committee decides, well, all they could do is add it to their budget, and we're going to need to add $466,000 SGF, then that's the discussion our committee will have, which we would be bringing back to you. So it's just a shift.
Representative Tarwater.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think everybody's pretty much covered everything I was going to say, other than the fact that we do this quite a bit when we have a bill that has a fiscal note. A lot of times we say they just need to absorb it. And that's what we're doing here. We're saying the Department of Education shall fund this. And then when we get to their budget next week, we'll drill down on it. Thanks.
Kincannon did not have a question anymore, right? Is that correct, Representative Kincannon? Any other discussion for Chairperson Williams? Representative Wolfmore.
I don't think I'll make a motion, but I have to tell you, I'm comfortable, because if this, when I vote on things, I like to know what the funding is. I mean, I'd like to know if I'm voting on SGF today, if the Children's Cabinet, even though that's an example, that will probably hurt another initiative that we have already decided is important. Can this come from ESSER funds? I mean, this makes me really uncomfortable to vote on something where we're kind of guessing. And I get it. I'm not arguing with the benefit of the program. I don't want to be misconstrued on that in any way, but I think this is going down kind of a little bit of a dangerous road in terms of budgeting practice to say we're going to fund it, but not say where. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Well, and obviously this is not the last time we're going to be discussing this. I mean, when we actually start the deliberations on the budget, we talk about all the items that came from the budget committees. So this is just a recommendation that will go into the budget, but we'll obviously have the opportunity at that time to discuss it and the funding mechanism for it as well. Any further questions? Seeing Representative Ballard.
Well, then for the clarification, if it goes in the budget, let me say that motion again. Does it say it's going to be funded?
Yes, it does. They shall fund it. But first, the recommendation is to look at those federal dollars. And secondly, if they can't, then they need to implement such program and they need to expend funds from their existing resources for 2022. So we are saying definite, Department of Education, you shall pay. You may choose. Do you want federal, SGF? What do you want to fund it from?
Okay, that's what I was thinking. It wasn't like it was undecided. You have said that education will fund that.
Yes.
And I believe Chairperson Williams had elaborated on that when we have the Department of Ed budget. That's the first mechanism of paying for it, correct?
Yes.
All right, so
Yes.
we can revisit that now, because otherwise I would make an amendment that we may say it needs to be funded, but we don't have a source. But if we're going to do it at education, which is what I discussed first, then I'm okay, because we still can discuss it, and it's not a done deal that they will fund it.
Correct.
It will be up to the K-12 committee to make that recommendation back to you on this item.
Okay, I'm comfortable with that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any further questions or comments? Seeing none, Chairwoman Williams.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move the committee recommendations for the 2021 and 2020 budget years.
Committee, you've heard the motion. Is there a second? Second by Representative Estes. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairwoman Williams. All right, we're going to go ahead. We already kind of ran past our time, so we're going to keep moving until 11:30 because I just looked at the calendar and I'm the only chairperson that scheduled a meeting this morning, so I want to thank all of you for attending. So I'll now turn it over to Representative Sutton. And please tell us which budget you're going to be starting with first. The Office of the Attorney General.
Okay, so we can have a community water container, but we can't have a community coffee pot. Is that? I am. I will not drop this bone. All right, we will start with the, thank you, Mr. Chairman. We'll start with the Attorney General's report for 2021. You'll find that in Volume 2, page 1007, for those of you playing at home. The agency requests a revised estimate of $26.9 million, including $7.1 million from the State General Fund in fiscal year 2021. This is an all funds increase of $265,000 and an SGF increase of $250,000 above the 21 approved amount. The SGF increase is attributable to the agency's supplemental request for the Victim Services Division to develop a mobile phone application to communicate with youth for the purpose of preventing youth suicide. You'll recall we passed that bill last year. Absent the supplemental request, the agency requests a revised estimate of $26.6 million, including $7 million from SGF. This is an all funds increase of $15,000 and an SGF decrease of a whopping $182. Efficiency in government. The revised estimate includes 173.3 FTE positions, which is an increase of 0.2. The increase is attributable to off-budget FTE positions for state agency representation in the Legal Opinions and Governmental Counsel Division. The governor recommends expenditures of $26.7 million, including $6.8 million SGF in 21. This is an all funds decrease of $165,000 and an SGF decrease of $300,000 below the agency's revised estimate. The decrease is attributable to reducing the use of SGF monies and increasing the use of agency funds. Similar song that we've been hearing across the agencies. The governor does not recommend the agency Victim Services supplemental request. This accounted for a total of $250,000 all SGF. This request would have provided funding for the Victim Services Division to develop a mobile phone application to communicate with youth for the purposes of preventing youth suicide. And it's not noted here, but that is as passed in legislation last year. The governor concurs with the agency's request for 173.3 FTE positions. The Budget Committee concurs with the governor's recommendation with a few adjustments. First, we maintain the transfer of $463,593 from the Kansas Endowment for Youth Fund to the Tobacco Master Settlement Compensation Agreement Fund in 2021. And we add language to permit the agency to make expenditures for other purposes from the Tobacco Master Settlement Compensation Agreement Fund in 2021. And that is to fund what we legislated, the app for youth suicide prevention. And then add $250,000 all from special revenue funds for the creation of a youth suicide, just as I said, for the creation of a youth suicide prevention mobile phone application with the Victim Services Division in fiscal year 2021. And I will stand for questions. Or continue. Either way is good with me.
Committee, are there any questions? Yes, Representative Carpenter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I know there's a lot of federal money coming down with the 988 program. I wonder if some of those funds can be used for this.
Chairman Sutton.
Of course, it's possible, but once again, we get into an area of, we'll fund it, but we don't exactly know what the funding mechanism is for sure. And so that's why we didn't look in that direction during the committee process.
Chairman Carpenter, to follow up. Representative Helgerson.
How broad is the language in number 2? Because if you make that language available to Tobacco Settlement Compensation Fee Fund, and you're giving them the authority to expend any funds, it's pretty broad authority for them to use those funds. Or are you tying it to number 3 specifically?
That's an excellent question, Representative. Mr. Chairman, the language that we included was very broad. It was intended for number 3, but you're exactly correct that this could be broadly interpreted. And I would be certainly open to narrowing the scope of that language.
Representative Helgerson.
If the chairman would like, you and I are on the same page. If you would like to craft some language and bring it to the committee whenever as a proviso, that's fine. Or however you'd like to handle that.
I think we could probably do it right here as we
You got
discuss
language?
it. I have the language as it's written right now, and I have an expert right here who is great with language, the legal jargon. All right, the language as it stands right now says, notwithstanding the provisions of any other statute during the fiscal year ending, these are actually 2. One of them says 2021, the other one says 2022. In addition to the other purposes for which expenditures may be made by the above agency from the Tobacco Master Settlement Agreement Compliance Fund, expenditures may be made by the above agency from such fund for the purpose of performing the powers, duties, and functions, never mind, it's not broad, pursuant to KSA 75-772. Okay. There we go. So it is narrowly crafted there. Thank you very much. That's got me out of that one. And amendments there too. So it is narrowly tailored for that.
Well, first, are you having a motion to have that included in fiscal years 21 and 2022?
Yes, that is part of the committee recommendations, yes.
All right, but this language needs to be included in the budget recommendation report.
That's correct.
All right. Is there a second? Second by Representative Helgerson. Any discussion on having this language added? Seeing none, Chairman Sutton, you may close. In regards to the amendment? Right, yeah, this is in regards to the amendment, not the budget itself.
Right, I move my amendment.
All right. Chairman Sutton has moved his amendment. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, the language is added. Now we're back on the budget. Representative Helgerson.
Second question I had, recently we received another notification of an opioid settlement. I think that's the second or third settlement. I'm assuming that it's all going through the AG's office. Was there any discussion about those funds and how they're going to be used in the agency?
Those would go to the litigation fee fund, and we didn't discuss those particular cases, but we did discuss the usage of the litigation fee fund, which, and this caused a little bit of heartburn, really, because that fund is used for future litigation and for maintaining and operating the agency. We are trying very hard to get away from that model. Certainly, the agency doesn't rely upon that funding because it's a rather inconsistent stream. But we want to make sure that the agency is not. You wouldn't want a police force funded by speeding tickets. All right, there are some, and I'll grant you that, but it's not ideal, all right? It doesn't work well. Yeah, I'll agree. Spring Hill used to be like that, by the way. They're not anymore, but yeah, they used to be like that. But I don't want the same situation to arise with the AG's office. I don't want them to be a prosecutorial law firm, all right? I'd like them to stay a state agency, and that's why, excuse me, for example, the master settlement money being transferred in, rather than using their litigation to fund their programs, I think is a really, really healthy move. They are still supported by SGF funding as well, and I'd like to keep it that way.
Representative Helgerson?
Well, it's my understanding in reading some of the information that that's tied specific to treatment and care of opioid individuals. And that's why I'm raising the question, because then it goes from the AG to a grant given to one of the other subcommittees. Can we, Mr. Chairman, if you don't mind, could we request the AG give us some additional background on the settlements, what they're expecting, and how the money is going to be used?
We can do that.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Williams?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Okay, so I wanted to ask about number 3. It says add $250,000 all from special revenue funds for the creation of a youth suicide prevention mobile phone application, which sounds great. And I wanted you to talk a little bit about how that ties into that Kansas Youth Suicide Prevention Coordinator that we provided for in 2019. What's going on? How I know that from the school district perspectives, suicide rates have doubled. Yep. And so I want to know the impact. Do they receive any coronavirus funding for some of these programs related to this? I know in my house district alone, at least three that I know of teenagers have committed suicide. How do they even know to get an app? How do they know what's available? What does this coordinator do? Help us understand what that legislation actually did, what it's doing, what this is going to do, and how it gets to the kids that need it, and why has there not been COVID money poured into something like this?
Chairman Sutton?
Well, all right, there's a little bit to unpack there. To explain the legislation that we passed, I'm afraid I'm going to have to bone up just a little bit on that one in order to explain that. What this money does is fund the development of the app. We're just getting this ball rolling right now. And that's why we found it important to fund this program right now when the issue is definitely rising. We were, I think, relatively prescient when we passed that legislation 2 years ago. When the governor decided that not to spend the SGF money on that, the Attorney General agreed that it is an important program, and that's why we sought this language to fund the program and get it into action. How it'll roll out, what that'll look like, I can't answer that question.
But perhaps
Williams.
Yes, but perhaps you could answer what we're currently doing with, what is that funding for the Kansas Youth Suicide Prevention? I mean, I guess we know what the coordinator funding is, but what are they currently doing? What is currently budgeted, or where is it budgeted to identify, create, and coordinate and support youth suicide awareness and prevention? What are our efforts right now in the budget? How can I find that in the budget?
I'm going to have to phone a friend on that one, Representative.
got so far? Do you know how much increased federal funds we've got so far from the FMAP? 319 million that I'm aware of. And I'm still fine. That's just from the feds and FMAP savings. That doesn't count the hundreds of millions of dollars that we got from local health.
We'll see how this works. Mr. Chairman,
Chairman Sutton?
upon further consideration, the program is just now getting started. It doesn't have it just added the FTE last year. This program is just getting started. It's still being funded through, or it's still a part of the Victim Services Fund. So that's where you'll find the funding as far as that's concerned. Once the program gets up and rolling and is funded so that something can actually happen, then we'll be able to point out with more authority what exactly is being done.
Okay, it's, my only comment on that, Mr. Chairman, is that we just went through, COVID. It just seems so sad that it's taking a whole year. Is the coordinators funded, correct?
Once we pass this budget, it will be.
Well, okay, right. It just seems sad that we haven't made any progress. Thank you.
Representative Kincannon.
Did I say I had a?
Oh, I thought you had a question.
Well, I do. I didn't indicate yet because I'm not sure I was quite ready. I'm a little bit behind the 8 ball because I had a hard time getting this pulled up. But anyway, I'm just wondering about using the key fund money, and I just know that in the past there's some criteria that's expected on how we use that, although through the years we have misused it. And we've gotten back on the path of using it appropriately the last few years. And I just would like some feedback from somebody on how we're supposed to be using those funds, and if this transfer is made, what does that leave in that? How much does that leave in a transfer that goes to the children's cabinet? And I just want some more information as far as the key fund.
Absolutely. We didn't just make this number up, 463,593. We weren't rolling dice on that. That's been the traditional transfer every year since the year 2000. That was not recommended in the governor's budget this year, for 21 or 22. The explanation being that there's enough in that fund to run for several years. When we looked at, however, at that fee fund balance, it's stable. It doesn't fluctuate, it's not growing, all right? It's stable. So to increase the need for spending by $250,000 to support our legislation and stop that transfer simultaneously did have an impact on that fee fund, a significant one. That's why we continued the transfers that we've always done, but added the expense, the spend of the $250,000 to address the need that we saw necessary as a legislature in 19.
Senator Kincannon.
So you know that money comes from the tobacco settlement money.
Yes, I'm
right.
aware, yeah.
Right, and that through the years has been reducing, become less and less as fewer
right.
smokers, and the thought was that let that continue to grow so that it can continue to fund itself in the out years when we are no longer receiving those funds.
Correct.
And I think the purpose here is completely appropriate use of funds. I'm just not sure that that's, I'd just like to know more about it to know whether that's the correct funding source as far as what their criteria is and what their ending balance would be if this transfer is made.
And we can have, obviously, there's items that we could look at as far as the transfer, because I doubt we're going to get it today, in the Kansas Lottery to EDIF. We can look at the balance of the key fund. We can also have all that distributed from the research department to the members of this committee, so we are aware of what the balances are. And I think, I just want to reiterate on the comments that you made earlier, Chairman Sutton. The transfer that you have going from the key fund, or from the tobacco settlement to the key fund, it has been going on since 2000?
Correct.
It's just not, it was not included in the governor's recommendation.
correct.
So the committee re-added that transfer that has been going on in every budget since the year 2000.
That is correct.
All right. So it's not a new transfer. This has been going on for 20 years.
Oh, yeah, we didn't reinvent this thing.
Yeah, okay. Representative Carlin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm wondering if we could get some information. I don't know if it's available right now, but I'd like to know what the balance is in the fund that comes from the False Claims Act. It's 5% of all of the monies that we get from the federal false claims settlements. And the Inspector General is funded out of that, but I'd like to know what the balance is, and I would also like to see what revenue has come into that fund since it was established in 05 or 6, maybe, to date, to see how much money has come in from that. My point is, I'm wondering if we can get some support from that fund for the Department of Labor concerns. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Chairman Sutton, do you have a response to that?
I came pretty prepared, but not for that one. I don't have a response.
Okay, we'll get information later. Representative Hoffman, do you have a question? Representative Wolfmore.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So it's always been coming out. Is it always been that amount?
Let me make sure. I know that it has, that was the amount in 20 and 19. Yes, I think that's always been the amount.
Okay, thank
All right, I'm not seeing any other further questions. So Representative Sutton, if you can move on to 2022, which the same items are from the Budget Committee. And I think we belabored the discussion in regards to that transfer in 2021. So if you can just go through 2022 and see if there's any questions, and then a motion.
Right. The 2022 is very, very similar with one minor exception. The agency requests $26.3 million, including $6.6 million from the SGF. An all funds decrease of $524,000 below the 21 estimate. It's an SGF decrease of $600,000. The primary reason for the decrease is the reappropriation of funding from 20 to 21 that does not occur in 22. The agency requests $50,000 SGF for fiscal year 22 enhancement requests. The agency requests this enhancement for a computer maintenance service costs related to the website that we've already beat into oblivion. Absent the enhancement request, the agency requests a revised estimate of $26.3 million, including $6.5 from SGF, an all funds decrease of $650,000, and an SGF decrease of $574 from the 21 estimate. It includes 173.3 FTEs, which is unchanged. The governor recommends $26.2 million, including 5.9 SGF. This is an all funds decrease of $122,000 and an SGF decrease of $700,000 below the agency's request. The decrease is primarily attributable to the acceptance of the agency's reduced resources budget, which includes a decrease of $650,000, all SGF, with most of the reduction replaced yet again with agency fee funds. Additionally, the governor does not recommend the agency's victim services enhancement request. This accounts for $50,000 SGF. The request would have provided funding for maintenance costs related to the Youth Suicide Prevention website and phone application within the Victim Services Division. The Budget Committee concurs with the governor's recommendation with the same three adjustments that I listed in 2021, and the additional notation of the Budget Committee notes that replacing SGF funds, you're going to hear this over and over again, replacing SGF funds with special revenue funds is a short-term solution for fiscal year 22, would not be sustainable as a solution for as a long-term budgetary tool. With that, I'll stand for questions.
Committee, any questions for Chairman Sutton? I would assume that the motion you made in fiscal year 21 in regards to that language.
Yes, that's for 21
and your motion
and 22.
did include 22. Okay.
Yes.
Any further questions? All right, seeing none, Chairman Sutton.
I move the committee report for the Attorney General's office for 2021 and 2022 as amended.
All right, committee, you've heard the motion. Second by Representative Helgerson. All those in favor say aye. Opposed? Motion passes. All right, we're going to go ahead and we'll resume discussion that we had for today on Monday, and that is
These other
going
ones
to
are
be
a lot easier. These other ones are a lot easier. We can chew through these.
the lottery may actually take some time.
Okay.
So
Yeah, that's a valid point.
Again, I said I wanted to try to get everybody out of here at 11:30. We did get through quite a few budgets this morning, but we'll go ahead and push back all the ones we did not get to today on to Monday morning. We are still planning on having a meeting Monday morning. However, the predictions of the weather have been changing on a daily basis. So it kind of depends on exactly what is decided in regards to how bad the weather may be. I know Representative Prale had shared with me earlier this morning that they're expecting about 10 inches of snow in Parsons. So that may be problematic for some of our members. So please just stay close to what leadership decides. I've had a conversation with them, but we are still planning on having a meeting at 9 a.m. subject to change. But obviously, if we would not have one, then we'd just bump the budget back. But right now, the schedule stands at having a meeting on Monday morning at 9 a.m. Representative Estes.
Speaker Reichman just sent out an email recommending we be remote that you may not have had a chance
Oh,
to see yet.
I have not seen that. Okay. So please check your email. And right now, like I said, I'm planning on having a meeting at 9 a.m. The only thing that's difficult about all of us being remote is the rules are that we have to be in the building to vote. So we wouldn't be able to do any motions on the budgets until we came back on Tuesday anyways. I'll let everybody know exactly what we're going to be planning in regards to Monday. So right now, as of the information we have, we are adjourned until 9 a.m. on Monday, February 15th.